Hey y'all, so today I wanted to talk about something that many of us writers are going to experience at some point in our lives, unfortunately, and that is trying to jump back into writing a series after experiencing major trauma or some other form of upheaval. This is top of mind for me right now because I am kind of in the midst of dealing with it. I'm living through this right now, so I have quite a bit of experience in it. And let me tell you, it is tough. It's really hard. It's hard enough to come back to regular writing during a time in your life when everything is going relatively smoothly, but you add in something like a trauma and it just becomes that much harder. The form of trauma or upheaval that we deal with is going to vary from person to person, and usually even season of life to season of life. For instance, a few years ago, I dealt with a lot of grief. From 2011 through 2016, I lost 5 close family members back to back to back from each year from 2011 to 2016. And it was a lot. It was a lot to deal with, even for someone that doesn't deal with mental health issues like I do. I struggle with anxiety and ADHD, and occasionally those morph into depression if I'm not very careful. So, adding 5 years of pretty much never-ending grief to that, and it's no wonder that I wasn't writing very much during that time at all. And then you add in the cancellation of my series with Penguin, and I was in a dark place. And in fact, I just really managed to dig myself out of that dark place and start finding some small measure of success as an indie author, transitioning from being purely traditionally published to building also an indie career when COVID-19 hit in 2020. And I don't have to tell you that was also hard. I mean, it's been hard for so many of us dealing with the uncertainties in the world, having to quarantine or isolate yourself so much, and realizing that so many people discount science and that it's been a lot, it's hit our country a lot harder, and there are a lot more deaths than there, should have been. And then, years into this, and we're still dealing with, recurrences and new strains of it. And, it's been a lot for all of us. So that definitely derailed things for me again, but nothing could have prepared me for the absolute worst physical trauma of my life that happened last year in 2021. And that was shattering my ankle. I don't want to dwell on that too much because that's not the point of this video. Isn't so much dealing with it's not so much the injury itself, it's coming back from it. But for those who are curious, I will just say I was rushing down the stairs. I needed to wash a uniform shirt to teach Zumba class that night. And I'd forgotten that my shirt was dirty until a few hours before I was supposed to teach the class. So I had a bundle of laundry in one hand and, well, no, that's how I normally would have gone down. I normally would have gone down the stairs the smart way. The bundle of laundry in a basket on one hand and holding the railing with the other. But I was in such a rush that time that I just had the pile of clothes in my arms, and I regret this deeply, and I ran down the stairs and I slipped on the last few stairs. I didn't even fall that large of a distance, but I landed really hard kneeling, and it was enough to just shatter my ankle. I knew immediately it was bad. Like, call 911. They had to shoot me up with ketamine, aka strong enough to be a horse tranquilizer. Firefighters had to carry me out of my house, but I don't even have any memories of it because I was so hopped up on the drugs that they gave me, and I don't remember the ambulance ride at all. Level of bad. That's how bad it was. And the only other things I will say in this video about that are that I broke my ankle in 6 or 7 places. I had to have a surgery a week later to insert pins and plates in my leg. I had inadequate pain management for at least 2 weeks. It was terrible. And then I went through 18 weeks of physical therapy. I probably could have used more than that, to be honest, because it's taken me challenging myself in Pilates and Zumba classes since I went back to Pilates in November and just taking but not teaching yet Zumba classes in December. And it's taken me from that point to this point, here we are almost to August of the next year, to get anywhere approaching feeling like my normal self again. And that's kind of both physically and mentally. To say that it forever altered me both physically and mentally is not an exaggeration. I still have a noticeable limp most of the time and trouble with certain motions. Sometimes I have trouble climbing up the stairs, but it's getting better. My brain will regress sometimes to speaking like a toddler when it's really tired. I will catch myself doing that a lot of the time. And it feels so weird when I catch on to it, but my husband and son have kind of learned to just roll with it, because usually I'll figure out that I'm doing it and I'll stop. But also, I finally have enough emotional spoons to write again, to write regularly, to start planning out strategies for social media posting and indie publishing again. And it feels great, you guys. It really does. But frankly, it's also overwhelming as hell. Back when COVID first hit, I was trying to finish and publish book 4 in my first and most successful purely indie series. And that's, it's called Untamed Elements. See, my brain still not completely what it used to be, but that's okay. Untamed Elements, and then Phoenix on the Rise is kind of the subtitle. And now 2 years later, and 3 years after book 3 was published, I'm still working on that. I'm still trying to finish writing and get published book 4. To say this is not ideal for indie publishing may be a pretty big understatement. I mean, in indie publishing, really ideally you want to publish books fairly often and fairly frequently, at least as frequently as you're able to write and publish them. I mean, don't try to kill yourself doing it, but the prevailing wisdom is the faster and more books you publish, the better. Certainly going 3 years without publishing, I think I did publish one book under a pen name, a paranormal cozy during that time, but that's it. There's not been anything else really. That's a real invalid thought to have, to face that reality of the situation. But dwelling on things like that, it does absolutely nothing to move me forward. And in fact, it tends to lock me in a never-ending death spiral of anxiety where I feel guilty that I'm not writing and producing books. And then I start stressing about leaving fans and readers hanging. And then I feel guilty again and more. And then that leads to more downward spiraling where I just have more and more anxiety, which then makes it even more difficult for me to tap into that creative side of things and actually write. Sound familiar? I'm sorry if it does, because I obviously understand completely. I know how it feels and it sucks. But the good news is that you don't have to remain locked in that pattern forever. It does not have to be a never-ending spiral downward, even if it feels like that when you're in the midst of it. Now, I don't have any magic pills or spells to help you just magically end it, but I do have some tips that may help you. They could work for you themselves, or they might help spark some other ideas that get you going again. So what are some good ways to break out of these internal traps and start making forward progress again on your writing? Tip 1, remind yourself that you are a human being, and humans need time to process trauma and grief and upheaval. It's perfectly okay to need time to deal with these things. And even if the period seems to last longer than you would prefer, which it definitely has for me both times that I've kind of dealt with this, it doesn't make you a bad person. Are you listening, self? I'm trying. So take a deep breath, and if you're holding on to guilt, let it go. Forgive yourself. Focus on taking small steps forward, because tip number 2, related to the last one, you do not have to be perfect. You don't. And in fact, it's impossible to try and achieve that. Nobody is perfect. You don't have to be perfect. All you have to do is just show up and put one proverbial foot in front of the other. Consistency is key in building any habit, not perfection. So be kind to yourself as you work on developing a regular writing habit again. You don't have to be perfect right out of the gate. Tip number 3, speaking of taking several small steps forward, that's my actual third tip here. Don't make the mistake of putting so much pressure on yourself or expecting to get the same high level that maybe you were doing before. Maybe you were able to write 3, 4, 5,000 words a day, but for now, maybe you're going to have to set a more modest goal of 500 words, 1,000 words, 25 words, whatever. Anything to just get going. It doesn't matter. Anything is better than nothing. Set clear, reasonable goals based on where you're at now and gradually work your way up. And remember, you may not make it quite back to the level you were at before. Maybe you won't be able to write 3, 4, 5, 6,000 words a day again, but that's okay. Like I said, anything is better than nothing. Meet yourself where your personal best is now, because anything is better than nothing. I know I've repeated that 3 times now, but I feel like some of us need to hear that over and over again. And if you do make your way back to performing at the level you were at before, that's awesome. I'm so proud of you. Be proud of yourself and keep on keeping on. My 4th tip is to consider letting yourself chase that shiny new project in order to channel that creative fire inspired by the new project into the existing series you really need to get back to working on. Normally, most of us authors who successfully finish books try to limit how often we let ourselves run after that new project down the rabbit hole. Because when they seem fresh and exciting, it's so great to work on them until you get slogged down into the trenches and then it starts to seem hard again. And the reason we kind of limit ourselves on that is because if we're not careful, we could find ourselves with 25 partial novels and absolutely no new projects to either shop around or publish if we indie publish. But I've discovered that sometimes, especially after a super long break where you've been dealing with trauma, grief, and or upheaval, it can be 100 times easier to get back into the habit of writing by actually switching gears and working on the new project. In a new project, you don't have to worry where you left off with an existing series with all the dangling plot lines and overarching storyline, a bunch of characters who have likely evolved into a bigger cast than you planned, and they all have a mind of their own, and a lot of the times what they want completely differs from what you think they should want. It could be a mess sometimes. And then you have to figure out how you're going to wrap all those things into a nice, neat little package in this book and maybe leave dangling plots if you're going to keep going with the series. Can be very overwhelming. So if you're starting on the new project, you'll be free of all these sometimes stressful expectations and find that it can be easier to just dive in fresh and work on the new project until you have fully solidified your regular writing habit again. And once you do that, you can probably do one of 2 things if you prefer, and based on what kind of a writer you are, you can just dive back into that new series and keep working on that until you finish it. If you're the kind of person that can't split your focus onto two different projects at once, just work on that one until you're done, and then hopefully you can then switch gears to get into the existing project that you need to finish. Now, if you're the kind of writer that can't work on 2 projects at once, you might still be able to take that burning eagerness that you had from getting back on track with the new project, channel it into the existing project, and then you'll be fine. If you're not that kind of writer, but you are the kind of writer who can work on multiple projects at once, you may find it better to use writing in the new project as kind of a carrot to work on the existing one, or a cookie if you don't really look at carrots as a reward. You can earn time working on the new book by getting a certain amount of words or minutes done working on the existing series that you really need to finish. And that brings me to my fifth and final, but likely most important tip. Focus on the joy of writing. It can be so hard when you're putting pressure on yourself to finish things and publish them commercially, whether it be through traditional means or as an indie. It can be so hard to focus on that joy. You know, you feel it in the beginning a lot of the time. You feel that kind of desperate urge and need to be published and to be validated, but you feel that pure joy of just sitting down and working on whatever the heck you want to work on. Yeah, you're thinking about marketability a lot of the time, but you're not so focused on just, I got to churn out these words, and then I got to publish this book, and I've got to get it edited, and I've got to, if you're indie publishing, and I've got to choose a book cover, and I've got to proofread it and put it all into this package and then publish it. And then you're still thinking immediately about the next book and the next book, and then that pressure just builds up. Or if you're being traditionally published, you know, you're thinking, are they going to buy my next book? If they don't buy my next book, where am I going to have any more success in publishing? I've been dealing with that myself since my series was canceled. I finally got tired of waiting for New York to publish more, and that's why I started indie publishing as well. I still have a literary agent, and I'm still hoping to sell something to New York again, but I haven't fully tied up my love of writing or my identity as a writer or my validation by whether or not New York buys something for me again, because they might not. And if they do, great, but if they don't, I'm still finding joy and love in writing now and connecting with readers now, or at least trying to, which is the whole point of this video today, and tying it back into finding the joy. It can be so exhausting and overwhelming thinking about all of those things, and you're putting so much internal pressure on yourself, and that just makes it harder to write. And at the end of the day, most of us do this because we love it. We love telling stories. We love connecting with readers. A lot of us started out reading books. We were huge bookworms as children, or maybe we started reading as adults, but a lot of us started reading as children or teens, and it's carried through for us for years, if not decades. And we just love it. We love books. We love stories. And we lose a lot of that sometimes when we start writing, and especially if we're dealing with a trauma or grief or processing any sort of upheaval in our lives. And it can be hard to get back to that joy. But let me tell you what, if you can, it's going to mean the difference between being able to sit down and write regularly again or feeling like you're just pulling teeth doing it. That's one reason why I personally have started working on a fresh, new, shiny project. And, I got covers, pre-made covers. I wasn't planning to buy them. I saw them. I belong to a few cover groups on Facebook, and I saw this group of covers and just fell in love with it and snapped it up. And, it sparked fresh, dynamic ideas for a series. And so I'm working on that, and I'm channeling that joy and that excitement and eagerness and passion into my existing series, the one I was talking about, Untamed Elements, so that I can finish that up for my readers and for myself, because I owe that to both of us. And with those 5 tips given and a little bit of my own personal experience shared, I'm going to wrap this video up here and just say, never feel like you're alone. Many of us are dealing with the same sort of issues that you are. And, try these tips. And if they don't work for you, maybe it'll spark some sort of an idea that will work for you. And just keep on writing, just like I'm going to keep on rambling because I can't seem to stop myself. And I hope you have a great time writing and rediscovering that joy.